Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars, topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. On this show, I dive into everything basketball related, from the NBA to the brackets and down to the prep level. I'm your host, Nick Robin, and today we're going to talk about why Kobe Bryant is not in my top 5, the Clippers' recent hiring of Tyronn Lue, and whether he will be the difference maker. Can the Warriors be great again? And lastly, I will settle some of the biggest debates in basketball/college sports. And those are, should athletes be paid? And should preps have the option of going straight to the pros? But before we begin, let's talk about my weekend and what happened on my drive to San Francisco. So on Friday morning, I left San Diego to go to San Francisco to pick up my TV. I know, kind of a stupid reason to travel nearly 500 miles in nearly 8 hours in the car just to pick up a TV that's probably lost more than half its value since I bought it back in 2018. But a guy's got to do what a guy's got to do when it comes to him and his TV. So I drove down. We were set to leave. It was me and two of my buddies. We were set to leave at 7:30 a.m. One of my friends had a date the night before, had a couple drinks, so he wasn't 100% waking up. Still got to my house by 7:30 a.m. My other friend did not. He didn't do anything. I warned him multiple times throughout the week to please be at my house. And it was supposed to be 7 a.m., but I pushed it back to 7:30 just to be nice. And come on, 7:30 is not that early. Most of us wake up around 6:30 in the morning to get to work. So he can definitely be at my house by 7:30. We only live 15 to 20 minutes from each other. He's not here at 7:30. I give him a call. He says to leave without him, but I know he's just saying that. So I end up going halfway to meet him. And that's what I want to know. Do I leave him to sulk all weekend and have the potential option of him being mad at me? Or do I be a good friend and I wait on him? I kind of wish I had gone with the former and just left him, because he was a pain in the ass the rest of the trip. He made us stop countless times on our way up. We stopped about 4 or 5 times. I typically only like to stop twice maximum when I'm driving up to Northern California. Once for gas and another time for food, particularly In-N-Out. For anyone that's been on a long road trip, that's typically what you want to get. It's easily the healthiest option you're going to get driving through the middle of nowhere. And the drive from San Diego to San Francisco is not a pretty one. After you get through LA, so you have to get through the LA traffic. That's one thing. Then you pass through some of the most rickety places you never want to live. Being from San Diego, I know we're a little bit spoiled here. You go through Bakersfield. Then you go through a couple 100 miles of just cow manure. You hit Fresno. You hit Stockton. Just places, no offense to anyone who's from there, they're not the best places to grow up. And we finally get there. We have a great night on Friday. We go sake bombing. I planned an entire little dinner myself, COVID friendly. 18 people, but we were all 6 feet apart in terms of the 3 different tables. We had a good time. Next day, my buddy, of course, the one who we could have left on the trip, ends up just sitting in the hotel room most of the day. We try and get him to come meet us in the park. 4 hours later, after being at the park, he finally arrives and starts complaining to us of why we're leaving. And we try to logically tell him, yo, dude, we've been at this park for 4 hours. You should have came at least 2 hours prior, even an hour before that we got to 4 hours. And, of course, he makes it all about himself, selfish. Basically, what I'm asking is, do I drop this friend or do I keep him around? And part of growing up is you have to start dropping people from your life that just don't provide any value. Enough about this story. Finally, we get the TV, and he kind of got his karma right back at him because we ended up putting the TV in the back of my car, and there was very little room for him, but he got to lay across sleep, and enjoy himself while I drove another 7 to 8 hours home. So I drove there and back. Neither of my friends offered to drive, but we were going up for my TV in their defense, but still, 15 hours driving can get a little tiresome. Thankfully, we got back in one piece. My friend complained the entire way that the music was too loud, even though it was only on 8 or 7 volume, which is out of 40. So it wasn't even 25% of the way up on the volume meter, but he still decided to complain nearly the entire car ride. Enough about that. Let's get into today's first topic, and that is why Kobe Bryant is not, in my opinion, a top 5 player of all time. And I just got done reading The Three-Ring Circus, which dives into the Lakers organization from 1996 to 2004. And as I mentioned on last week's podcast, we are talking about who Kobe Bryant was from ages of 17 to 26, not who he became to be once he won his final 2 titles with the Lakers and created this whole Mamba mentality marketing plan. And again, we're talking about him from ages 17 to 26. And around that time, he was one of the most selfish players in the history of the league. Someone who did not listen to Shaq, the veteran on the team, and the guy who was responsible for bringing him 3 titles. He did not listen to head coach Phil Jackson. He did not listen to other veterans such as Rick Fox, Karl Malone, Gary Payton. It was Kobe against the world, and that's exactly how he wanted it. There are so many things that could be said about Kobe Bryant at this young age, from the time he was 17 to 26, just not willing to buy in and really never learned from his mistakes. And he is the main reason, I would say, that this dynasty imploded and fell apart. He was not willing to let Shaquille O'Neal be the man when he clearly was the better of the two at this time in Kobe's career. He ran out Shaquille O'Neal in terms of getting him traded to Miami Heat. He ran out Phil Jackson, that just at this point in his coaching career just did not want to babysit the young Laker anymore. So let me begin with my top 10. I got into this on an episode a while back in June. But for those that don't remember, I have Michael Jordan, the clear number 1. LeBron James, who has recently leapfrogged the guy who was in front of him, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So LeBron 2, Kareem 3, Magic 4, Bill Russell. And for those out there that said he played in a diluted league, you got to think that there was only 8 to 14 teams when he won these championships. That must mean that those teams had to have better players than a league that had 30 teams, because there's so much fewer teams, fewer spots. And just so you know, he played in the same era as Wilt Chamberlain, and he outproduced him in terms of championships 11-2. So he was clearly the best player in his generation, and for that, I still put him at number 5 all time. Number 6, Wilt, just because the scoring numbers are unbelievable. I don't care if you're playing against guys who are 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", and the biggest centers at the time are 6'8", 6'9", to average 50 points and 25 rebounds in a single season let's just take a look quickly and see how many players in the last 10 years have averaged half of that. So we're talking 25 points and 12.5 rebounds. So that accomplishment from 2002 to the 2003 season, so we're talking 17 years, has only been accomplished 5 times by 4 different players. Kevin Love in the 2013-2014 season, as well as the 2011-2012 season. Giannis Antetokounmpo this past season. Joel Embiid in 2018-2019. And then DeMarcus Cousins in 2017-2018. And just for more reference, outside of Kevin Love, in 13-14 playing 77 games, none of these players played more than 64 games. So almost less than 75% of the games. Again, 5 times, 4 players, 25 points, 12.5 rebounds a game since 2002-2003. So again, back to Wilt Chamberlain. Yes, he is 6 all-time on my list of the greatest players of all time. He did things that no one will ever do again. Players today are barely capable of doing half of what he did in his playing days. So number 6, Wilt Chamberlain. Moving on, number 7, Tim Duncan. Number 8, and this is where it might get a little controversial, 8, Larry Bird. 9, Kobe Bryant, and 10, Shaquille O'Neal. So looking down this list, and one of the biggest determining factors for me was Finals MVPs. Because that clearly tells you that you are the most important player on a team that won the title. Kobe Bryant has 2, both coming post-Shaq in 2008, 2009, and 2009-2010. Shaquille O'Neal won the other 3 Finals MVPs as part of Kobe Bryant's 5 championships. There's argument to say that Shaq should be ahead of Kobe on this list, but I'm giving it to Kobe for the fact that he won 2 titles to Shaq's 1 title without the other. And the fact that he put together an amazing 20-year career that, not many players have played 20-plus seasons in the NBA. It is a very short list. The only players to play at least 20 or more seasons are Jamal Crawford, who is still an active player, Kobe Bryant, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Those 3 have 20. Next, with 21 seasons, Dirk Nowitzki, Kevin Garnett, and surprisingly, Kevin Willis, and Robert Parrish. And lastly, with 22 seasons played, the most in NBA history, Insanity Vince Carter. So just by the fact of Kobe's longevity, you got to put him ahead of Shaquille O'Neal. And the reason I'm talking about this right now is because I just have a lot of Kobe fans in my life that will go to their grave saying that Kobe is a top 5 player of all time, but he just isn't. I'm going to come back with you after this commercial break with my argument of why Kobe Bryant is not a top 5 player in NBA history. You're not going to want to miss that. Stay tuned.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we're back now on the show, and we just got done beginning the argument of why Kobe Bryant is not a top 5 NBA player of all time. Let me quickly go through my top 10 again. So we get at the top, we have Michael Jordan, LeBron James 2, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar 3, Magic 4, Russell 5, Wilt 6, Duncan 7, Bird 8, Kobe 9, and Shaquille O'Neal 10. So, again, I still have Kobe Bryant as the 9th greatest player in the history of the NBA. 9th all time. Pretty good. He's in that upper echelon of the greatest players to ever dribble a basketball. So it's not like I'm doing him any discredit and saying something absurd like he's not even in the top 20 or the top 15. He's still a top 10 player in the history of this league. So let's just start there. It's not like I'm saying he isn't a great basketball player, because he most certainly is. But I can't put a guy in my top 5 who was so selfish, unwilling to be a team player, and honestly did not make the players around him much better. He doesn't have that same charisma and leadership skills that guys like LeBron James, Magic Johnson, Bill Russell, guys that don't care whether they score or not. Kobe Bryant was the exact opposite. He wanted all the shots that he could take. He was willing to shoot his teams out of games. He went after his rivals because he needed to show the league that he was the best player, whether it was Rip Hamilton, Kevin Garnett, Dwayne Wade, LeBron James. He needed to go after these guys to show that he was the best. And he was one of the best, but he just doesn't do it for me. And just looking at the finals MVPs, it says a lot there. Michael Jordan won 6, LeBron James 4, Magic Johnson 3, Tim Duncan 3, Shaquille O'Neal 3. Bill Russell, the trophy's named after him, for God's sake. So he's not going to have any, but he won 11 championships. He probably was the best player, or was the reason his team won in at least 8 or 9. So let's just say he has 8 or 9 finals MVPs. Kobe Bryant, to me, is one of the most overrated players in the history of this league. How can you put a guy in the top 5 who threatened to leave his team to go play for possibly the worst team in the history of the NBA and the LA Clippers? Although the team was backing him the entire time he was going through a rape trial from 2003 that backed him, that paid for half of his private jet fees of travel to go back and forth throughout the season. An organization that was so good to him, and he was just about to backstab him and go to the other tenant in their own building. So how can I say a guy like that is top 5? A guy who also signed a $50 million 2-year contract when he was well past his prime, was unwilling to let other players take over. If you go back and look at the free agent meetings he had with Chris Bosh and LaMarcus Aldridge and many other players, he told them basically that he was the top dog and that they were just going to be a side piece to the show, like Pau Gasol was in 2008, in 2009, and 2010. He wasn't willing to just admit that he no longer was the same player he was in his prime. So for that, I can't put him in my top 5. Looking at some of the other players on this list, Tim Duncan, outside of the 99-2000 season, the Spurs never won less than 50 games. And that includes the 2011-2012 season when they only played 66 games. So every year, Tim Duncan guaranteed his team would win at least 50 games. And Tim Duncan is the best player to compare to Kobe Bryant, as they were contemporaries. Tim Duncan came to the league a year after Kobe, after a 4-year stand-out All-American career at Wake Forest. He retired the same year as Kobe Bryant after the 2015-2016 season. They met in the playoffs on numerous occasions. Kobe did have the better, winning 4 out of the 6 series. Duncan also swept the Lakers out in 2013 after Kobe went down with his Achilles injury. So despite the playoff success, Kobe did have a better team early on in his career, but Tim Duncan, over the course of his career, was the better overall leader and had greater team success. He won his first title in 1999. He won his last title in 2014. That is a 15-year gap between his first and his fifth and final title. Kobe won his first title in 2000 and his last one in 2010. That's a 10-year gap. Still very impressive, but Tim Duncan was able to keep his career going at a more steady pace. After Shaq left in 03-04, and after his Achilles injury during the 2012-2013 season, Kobe and the Lakers went through some of the worst spurts in Lakers history. They lost the most games in finals history in 3 consecutive seasons, culminating with 65 losses in his 20th and final season with the franchise. Again, he was never willing to take a step back, whereas Tim Duncan, he allowed Manu Ginobili to go off. He allowed Tony Parker to do his thing. He gracefully allowed Kawhi Leonard to take over when he needed to in the 2014 finals. Do you really think a middle-aged 34 to 38-year-old Tim Duncan would have been able to make the finals in 2013 or 2014 if he didn't allow his teammates to take over the scoring load from him, and he continued to do what he did best, which was rebound, play great defense, and score when he needed to? That's what a leader does when he realizes that his skills have diminished and that he needs younger, more athletic players to take over in certain moments. Because Tim Duncan is not making back-to-back finals appearances without the help of Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Kawhi Leonard, Boris Diaw, Thiago Splitter. He knew how to win. And that is something that Kobe never really figured out. Even when he won titles in 2009 and 2010, he won on his terms. He was going to win by scoring and shooting whenever he thought he needed to, which in his case was all the time. And for that reason, he can't be put ahead of a player like Tim Duncan or even a player like Larry Bird, who is number 8 on my list, 1 spot ahead of Kobe Bryant. Larry Bird was another player that just played a team game the way it should be played. Kobe Bryant, again, never realized that, and that is why he's 9th, not in the top 5, and he just wasn't an efficient scorer. And I know he took harder shot than most players, but that was to his own detriment. He could have passed out to the open player, but he thought in his mind that him taking the shot had a higher percentage of going in than passing it to a guy who was wide open. And looking at, again, the finals MVPs, MJ has 6. LeBron James, 4 and counting. Kareem only had 2, but had 6 championships. And there were moments when he should have won the finals MVP over Magic Johnson, like in 1980, when Kareem injured himself, was unable to play in Game 6. Magic comes in, takes over, has the 42, 15, and 7, playing all 5 positions, and takes home the finals MVP when Kareem was the best player throughout that series. There are a lot of factors that go into this, but the most important thing was that the players in my top 5, not along with being great players, probably not including Michael Jordan, who was the only one in the top 5 who won on his terms. He wanted to be the scoring leader, and people told him throughout his career that a scoring leader could not win an NBA championship, but he proved them all wrong. And it's ironic because Kobe is the closest thing we have seen since Michael Jordan, and he did the best impersonation of MJ that we have seen since Jordan retired. But Jordan just did it better. And I think one thing that is very underrated is that Michael trusted Phil in a way that Kobe never did. It took some convincing, but eventually Jordan played the triangle offense to perfection, while Kobe just refused to. He didn't want the ball out of his hands. He didn't want other players to get involved, which is such a simple... The triangle is not simple, but what the triangle does is very simple. It gets the ball in everybody's hands. It keeps everyone involved. Everyone is a threat to score on the court when playing the triangle offense. Something that Kobe just couldn't get through his head. He wanted the ball in his hands at all times and wanted the other guys to just stand around. And what that causes is just unhappy players and players that are just not bought in and aware at all times because they're used to just having someone dribble around while they're just standing there, and it makes them lackadaisical at times as they're not fully in the game on the offensive side of the ball. And that can do a lot of damage to a team, but because of the talent they had with Shaq and Kobe and veterans like Rick Fox, Horace Grant, they were able to overcome Kobe's faults in his game at that time. I will admit, though, after the 2 titles, Kobe somewhat changed his mentality and how he operated as a leader. He somehow got everyone to buy in that he was a good leader when in his career he never really was. And I know that might be harsh to say, but after reading this Jeff Pearlman book, these are first-person encounters with Kobe. And some of his teammates hated him, wanted to take him into an alley and fight to the death. Teammates especially, did not like him. There were the occasional few, Derek Fisher, honestly, really only Derek Fisher, that really never said a bad word about him, but he didn't even invite, and this is something that is very questionable. Kobe, when he got married or engaged, nobody knew about it. No one even knew he had a girlfriend. No players were invited to the wedding. How much does that say about Kobe Bryant? The fact that he didn't have one coach, one player at his own wedding, when a basketball team, I'd say more than any other sport, is supposed to be as tight-knit of a group, when there's only 14 to 15 players on the team, when in retrospect there's 50 players on an NFL team and 25 plus players on an MLB team. It just speaks to who Kobe was, and I can't put a guy like Kobe Bryant in my top 5. That's it. There's no other argument you need. His talent is indisputable. He's a prodigy, like a piano player or a violinist. He is all-time in terms of the talent and the dedication he put into his craft, but the fact that he wasn't able to realize certain things throughout his career, from the triangle and how it would help his team to when he was past his prime and he needed to let other players step in and help him carry the load. The fact that he wasn't able to realize that, I can't have a guy like that in my top 5. LeBron James makes his teammates better. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar allowed Magic Johnson to run the show at times. Bill Russell, one of the most unselfish superstars in any sport. And then Michael Jordan, say what you want to say, he was basically Kobe, but he did it better and more efficient and was able to buy into the offense and respected Phil more than he had ever respected any head coach. It is shocking that Phil Jackson was able to come back and coach the Lakers after he left the first time. Nevertheless, Kobe Bryant is still one of the top 10 greatest players in the history of this league, and he deserves so much respect for what he did. And again, R.I.P. Kobe. We all miss you. And me personally, I wanted to see what you were going to do with that second half of your career. You had already won an Oscar. Fun fact, the tallest guy to ever win an Oscar. And you were going to write stories that our children and our children's children's were potentially going to be reading for the rest of our lifetimes and eternity. And it's sad what happened. You and your daughter, Gianna, along with the 7 other people who perished in this tragic helicopter crash. Again, to note, Kobe Bryant is one of the best players to ever step on a basketball court. And I think he will be in the top 10 for the long foreseeable future. I don't see anyone in the league right now who we can put up to him that will take his spot, except for potentially, I'd say, the Greek Freak, who is doing things that we have never seen. Moving on now, after this commercial break, we are talking Tyronn Lue's recent hiring by the LA Clippers and whether he will be the difference maker that this team needs to get past the second round and on to the NBA Finals. Stay tuned.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, and we are talking Clippers now. Yes, that team that gave me my first job in sports. What a great time that was, commuting from San Diego to LA 3 to 4 times a week just to work a job that, if you put it into perspective, was basically just filling up my gas tank because, it was a 4-hour round trip, about 200 plus miles. And what a great experience it was, and it led me into my brief but very interesting sports career across both the LA Clippers and Oakland A's. But let's move away from the business side of sports. We're talking about the product on the field. And the Clippers, we spoke about on the pod a couple weeks ago, decided to part ways with Doc Rivers. I would say it was more of a firing than a parting in the ways from what the media has been saying. And the owner, Steve Ballmer, was not too happy when he found out how many picks, when he realized again how many picks he had given away to get Paul George to LA, where they ran into some trouble with the Nuggets, up 3-1, and lost not one, not two, but 3 consecutive games that one win would have given them their first ever conference finals appearance. Not finals appearance, but conference finals appearance. And let's just take that into perspective. The LA Clippers have now been around for 50 years and have never even made a conference finals. Despite how successful they've been the past almost decade now, I'd say that they are still the worst franchise in NBA history. Again, no conference finals appearance, no finals appearances. 50 years doesn't get much worse than that. But looking now at that Paul George trade, they don't get Kawhi without Paul George. So again, it wasn't that they were just getting Paul George for Oklahoma City. They were also getting the signing of Kawhi Leonard. And last week, they made their first big play of the future by signing Tyronn Lue to a 5-year contract. And for those that aren't familiar with Tyronn Lue's track record, he took over for David Blatt during the 2015-2016 season after David Blatt had started out the season 31-10, which is pretty damn impressive. And the rest of the season, they went 27-14. It doesn't take a math genius there, but David Blatt was 4 games better than Tyronn Lue after Tyronn Lue took over. And if not for a miraculous 3-1 comeback in the finals, Tyronn Lue would be 0-3 in the finals during his tenure with the Cavaliers. And I don't think you can really track how good of a coach someone is when you have the second greatest player on your team in LeBron James. So people, the media keep on talking about how great of a coach Tyronn Lue is. And hey, for all we know, he could be. But we really don't have a solid track record to say that he's going to change around this Clippers situation, which what we've seen in recent weeks with players coming out saying that they were irritated at the fact that Kawhi Leonard had this whole load management situation going on, or the fact that he was living in San Diego and would, on more than one occasion, be late to the plane departure on road trips, rubbed teammates the wrong way. They also need to figure out whether or not they're going to re-sign Montrezl Harrell, who was a non-factor in that Nuggets series, or Lou Williams, who, again, in the playoffs, does not show up. So there are a lot of problems that I don't think Tyronn Lue is going to be able to fix right away. And I'd say one of the biggest things is the Clippers need a leader. They need someone who's going to bark at players to get into the right position, who's going to hold people accountable. And as we saw last year, Kawhi Leonard is not that guy. Paul George is not that guy. And is Tyronn Lue going to suddenly pick Kawhi in the rear end and somehow get him that kind of personality? Because it doesn't work that way. Kawhi Leonard is who he is, which is one of the best players in the NBA. He speaks more from his play on the court than the actual words that come out of his mouth, and that is totally fine. That's honestly why I love Kawhi Leonard. This is a guy that doesn't talk trash, doesn't say anything to you, and he goes on the court, drops 25 and 10 on you night after night, and goes about his business. Who doesn't like a superstar like that? I mean, we also, and I'd say America loves the Gary Paytons and the guys like Michael Jordan, Reggie Miller, who talk a good game while playing a good game. But there is something to say about guys like Kawhi Leonard. So yeah, there are a lot of issues here for Tyronn Lue and the Clippers. And another one of them is their point guard situation. And Patrick Beverley, he's a fine point guard, but he's not going to win you a championship. And what we saw last year is the Clippers need someone who can create shots for others. And Paul George isn't that guy. Kawhi Leonard has become a better passer, but he's not the point guard for this team. They need someone like a Rajon Rondo who was able to control a Lakers locker room with guys such as Anthony Davis and LeBron James. There have been stories from Jackie McMullen where he told LeBron or called out LeBron when he gave a dirty look to Kyle Kuzma. You can't do that to players like that because their confidence is just shot. And they're going to be thinking about that for the next 3 days. When you're a guy like LeBron James and you're one of the greatest players ever, and you give a dirty look or say something to a younger player who's only 23, 24, 25, and is a minor part of your team, they're going to take it personally. They're going to be devastated. They grew up watching LeBron, rooting for LeBron. So it's those small things that as someone like a Rajon Rondo, and let's see if this would ever happen, like a Chris Paul, who, I mean, as we know, was on the Clippers for 6 seasons and was kind of ran out of town, traded to the Houston Rockets. So there are a lot of issues here that I don't think Tyronn Lue is going to be able to fix. And why Tyronn Lue? Why someone who is understaffed with Doc Rivers? And I know Tyronn Lue isn't going to coach exactly like Doc Rivers, but they must have somewhat similar coaching styles as he worked under him for the past year. And why not bring in a fresh face, someone from the college level who's used to keeping young players in check? Because that's what this team needs more than anything. Players need to be accountable. Someone needs to tell Kawhi to start fitting in rather than trying to be different. And I think the media is totally overblowing everything that has gone on in Clipperland, because at the end of the day, this team still has 2 of the 10 best players in the NBA. They still have one of the best 6-men in the NBA in Lou Williams. They have one of the best small ball 5s in Montrezl Harrell. Whether or not they decide to re-sign him, is yet to be determined. And they'll be okay if they let him walk. Zubac is a formidable big who, at 7 foot, can do a lot of damage inside the paint, can cover bigger bodies that they're going to have to get through, such as Nikola Jokic, such as Anthony Davis and Dwight Howard, to get to the finals. They still have a solid team around them that I think just needs to add a piece here and a piece there, and they're going to be okay. So yes, they blew a 3-1 lead, but it was only year one of a team that barely had Kawhi and Paul George available for most of the season. It was a weird season for them, like it was for most teams, and I think they're going to come back ready and angry and determined to show everyone that they're not just a doormat. Like, the media always likes to blow things out of proportion, and this is one of those things. And yeah, although Tyronn Lue was a part of Doc Rivers' staff, I believe that a fresh face is always a positive, especially when you've had a coach who's been there for as long as Doc Rivers had been in LA. Things had grown a little stale. They have a new mind that's coming in, hopefully can shake things up, and we'll see what they can do this year in free agency or with trades. They still have, again, two of the best players in the NBA. So I think it's going to be interesting how Tyronn Lue positions them to be successful this upcoming season. And Tyronn Lue has already made moves by stealing away coaches from other teams, including the recent finals recipient in the Miami Heat and assistant coach Dan Craig. He's also looking at former Nets head coach Kenny Atkinson. So he's already piecing together a solid coaching staff that knows that next year there's going to be a time clock as soon as the season starts, because Steve Ballmer is no longer going to put up with mediocrity. He's not going to put up with first round, second round exits. They are in win now mode, because as the media always says, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George can leave as soon as next year if they decide to opt out. And all those assets that the Clippers gave up to get these two guys to LA, it's not going to look good. So next year, Ballmer's going to open up his pocketbook and he is going to do whatever it takes, whether he has to go over the luxury tax, to make this team a champion. And it's not going to be easy, because you have NBA champs in your building in the LA Lakers. You have the Golden State Warriors, who we're about to talk about right after this segment, that are going to be itching to play after nearly a 19th, 20-month hiatus for Klay Thompson, and basically Steph Curry, who played only but 5 games all of last season. You got the Nuggets, who took them out in the second round last year. You have the Dallas Mavericks with Luka Doncic, arguably the best player in the league within the next 2 to 3 years. So there's going to be a lot of competition. The Clippers got to be ready, and I think Tyronn Lue, we're going to see what he's made out of, because if he doesn't start winning right away, it doesn't matter that they just gave him a 5-year contract. They're going to cut his ass if they're not playing to the level that management thinks they should be at. Moving on now, after we get back from this commercial break, we're going to be talking Golden State Warriors and whether or not they can be great again next season.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
I want to start off by saying that I am not a Warriors fan at all. To be honest, I secretly detest the Warriors. Well, I guess not secretly, since I've said it publicly on many occasions, and it's a really immature reason why. In 2015, when the Warriors were making their run into being one of the up-and-coming teams in the NBA, they were in the finals against the Cavaliers, and I'm a big LeBron fan, a huge LeBron fan, and I want LeBron to go down as the greatest, if not at least the second greatest player of all time. And I was rooting for the Cavaliers, and I was dating a girl from Danville, which is a small little community in NorCal in the East Bay area, very ritzy area, a lot of Warriors fans. And I just remember we were dating at the time, and it was Warriors, Cavs, and I was rooting for the Cavs. She was rooting for the Warriors, of course, and just made me so angry that the Warriors were winning. And because I was dating this girl, we ended up breaking up, and I just always just had a hatred for not just the Warriors, but just, I guess, the Bay Area, which is funny because I ended up moving there a couple years later. It was stupid because I want the Warriors to be great again because I think it's good for basketball. And as much as I dislike the Warriors, I have nothing but respect, and probably one of my favorite people in the history of the league, Steve Kerr. The fact that he's just so humble and that he's done everything you would possibly want to do in your basketball career. He wasn't by any means one of the best players ever when he was in the NBA. He was just a role guy who knew his role, was a great three-point shooter, had the luck of playing on a championship team in the 90s Bulls, won 3 straight championships, went to the Spurs, ended up winning a 4th consecutive championship, becoming one of the only players in NBA history to win 4 consecutive championships. And before he retired, he won another championship with the Spurs in 2003, where he had a heat check moment, 4th quarter, where he drained 3 threes. So Steve Kerr did a lot for what his talent provided him with. And then after that, he became the general manager of the Phoenix Suns, where he did have some great success, and then became a commentator where he was also kick-ass in that as well. And then he became the head coach of the Golden State Warriors that have now won 3 championships in the past 6 years. So he's basically done everything you would want to do in your basketball career. The player on championship teams, the commentator, the general manager, and the head coach. And this is a guy who was never the most talented player on his own team. When he was at Arizona, he wasn't the best player on his team. This is a guy who barely made the NBA, but he worked at his craft and did everything in his power to stick around for what was a 15-year career. And let's be honest and say it how it is. Like, if Steve Kerr tried to make it in the NBA today, I'm not sure if he would. Because the league, it's just human development. The players are just more athletic. They're bigger, stronger, faster. We now have guys who are 6 to 7, 8 inches taller than Steve Kerr that are just as good as shooters. And it's incredible how the league has changed over the years. And this is only 15 to 20 years ago. But again, Steve Kerr, a class act in the NBA, and I want nothing but success for him. But at the time, I just didn't like the Warriors. Draymond Green, he's that guy. Draymond Green's that guy that you love if he's on your team, but you hate his guts if he's on the other team. He's that pesky, not uber talented player. He's the not super talented player, but is just Johnny Hustle and does everything somewhat well and has great teammates around him in Curry and Klay Thompson that they just come off screens. He passes the ball and he gets the assist. So let's take a look at next year's Warriors. And they're in an interesting scenario right now. They got the 3 championships in the last 6 years. But this is now going to determine whether they become the next version of the Spurs, where They're great year in and year out for multiple decades, winning at least 50-plus games, going deep into the playoffs year after year, and able to find new players to put in where other players are now gone. Because this team doesn't have Andre Iguodala or Sean Livingston, Andrew Bogut, or those glue guy veterans that made this team so multifaceted. Or do they go to the wayside like the Miami Heat after LeBron left, or the Lakers after Shaquille O'Neal left in 2004? But the thing is here, they're not losing any members of their core from their 2014-15 championship. Yes, they are losing Kevin Durant, but they were still a championship contender and team without him. 67 wins in 14-15, 73 wins in 15-16, and if not for a Draymond Green suspension and a couple of things here and there, they would have been back-to-back champions. LeBron would never have his Cavaliers championship. He might still be in Cleveland for all we know. And Kevin Durant lands with Boston, or possibly even stays with Oklahoma City. So there's a lot of sliding glass doors here that, if the Warriors had won in 16, changed the course of the NBA. Back to my original point. This team has not lost their three key members from that team: Curry, Thompson, and Green. Those three guys, and as we saw last year, are still the catalyst that makes this team go. Went 6-0 without Kevin Durant in the second round as well as the Western Conference Finals, and they looked like they were still the team that we saw in 15-16 that the whole country grew in love with. And then once Durant came over, they became that bad guy, that team that you wanted to root against. But Kevin Durant's now in Brooklyn, and this team is in a crossroads, again, between the Spurs road or the forgotten champions. And there's a lot of question marks going into next year. Steph Curry is 32. Can he still dominate the same way he did back in 16-17 and 17-18? Klay Thompson's coming off an ACL injury and hasn't played in an NBA game since June of 2019. By the time next year rolls around, the season might not even start until mid-March. Draymond Green, a guy that a lot of his game is based off his athleticism and is only 6'6", is he going to be able to play the same defense that he has played during their championship run over the past several years? Again, lots of question marks. What do they do with the number 2 pick? Do they swap it for another star caliber player, or do they hopefully hit gold and select someone that's going to help their team right now? And as a lot of people have been saying, this is one of the weakest drafts in several years, but I think there's still a couple diamond in the roughs that could turn into players that can help the Warriors team extend their title run right now. They need a center, and James Wiseman provides the size that the Warriors so greatly lack. He's 7 foot, and before the lost freshman year, due to, of course, receiving money / benefits that you typically shouldn't be receiving, he was nearly a consensus number 1 overall pick. Let's not make the same mistake that so many teams have by passing on guys like Michael Porter Jr. or Bol Bol. There's no reason why this guy should still not be a top 3, top 5 pick. It's not like he forgot how to play basketball, and that is why guys like Michael Porter Jr. slip in to the later part of the lottery, because teams just forget about them. They think just because they missed a couple months, they're not going to be the same player that they were earlier in the season when they were rated the best prospect in basketball. Or they flip them along with Andrew Wiggins for a star caliber player. But I think you give Andrew Wiggins a chance with this team. This guy is a former number 1 overall pick. He's shown he can score at times. He's averaged 24 points a game. And as a 3rd, 4th option, That's not a bad player to have. And I think Steve Kerr can finally untap this defensive potential that he's so been lacking his entire career. The guy's 6'8", can jump out of the building. Why can't he play defense? And if Tyronn Lue and Eric Paschall can stay healthy and continue, and Paschall, in his case, can build off his solid rookie campaign, that adds a couple players to this bench. And there are going to be players that want to join a Warriors team. The culture, from what has been shown in the media, is amazing. People love playing for the Warriors. And there's going to be people that want to chase a ring, that don't want to go team up with LeBron. They want to beat LeBron. And there's going to be guys that will take the mid-level exception to come with this team because they know they're a piece or two or possibly maybe three away from breaking through back to the finals. There's a lot to be hopeful for in Golden State, and I think some teams are going to sleep on them early on. But you got to remember, this team has two of the best shooters of all time, and you don't just stop knowing how to shoot. The athleticism is the first thing to go, but a shooting stroke will be there forever, and that's why guys like Klay Thompson and Steph Curry are not just going to go away once they get into their early, mid-30s. And we haven't even discussed how much better the maintenance and physical conditioning of players are. I mean, look at LeBron. The guy's going on 36 years old, still playing like he's 26. Hyperbolic chambers. These players have enough money to buy 3 of them if they'd like. And the crazy thing is, how the hell did LeBron James get a hyperbolic chamber in a bubble? That is insanity. But back to the Warriors. They have the pieces to contend right now. They need to add to their bench because that's probably by far their weakest point. And they got to decide what they're going to do with this number 1 pick. Why swap it for another star? Why not get a player that they can build around so once their other 2 to 3 superstars are on the latter half of their careers, they have a guy who's been learning from probably 2 of the best professionals in the game in Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. I hate how all organizations feel like they just need to get rid of their picks and not build towards the future, because that's how you end up like the Lakers. Lakers prior to winning the championship. They were losing year after year. Kobe put them in a tight hole after he left, and it took them nearly 7 years to recover. So I believe the Warriors will be great again next year. In terms of them making it to the finals, it's a packed East that's going to be a tough call. But if they can play like they did in 15 and 16, I mean, they're going to be a tough team to beat once again. And before we go, I would like to hear from you guys, the listeners. Not sure how many there are out there, but with the end of the basketball season, it's getting a little bit tougher to come up with ideas of what to talk about. So if you want to send anything in, my personal email is robinnick@gmail.com. That's ROBBINNICK@gmail.com. Thank you, as always, for listening to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review, because that really helps us out, and we're trying to build a brand here. Also, if you can please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, that would be great. Lastly, check out my personal Twitter at Nick, N-I-C-K, Picks, P-I-C-K-S 5, and Instagram at Nick's Picks 13. That's Nick's Picks 13. Thank you again, and catch you on our next episode of the GSMC Basketball Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.